Getting to know a place is one of the best parts of the adventure of travel, and you can tell a lot about an area from its craft beer scene. We speak with craft beer writers about what's worth checking out in beer cities all over the country. From visiting the can't-miss breweries in the area to checking out festivals that show beer communities at their finest, on each episode we get a better look of the local beer scene from a national perspective. Beer with Strangers starts now.
Welcome to Beer with Strangers. I'm Tony Russo, and this week we are joined by Terry McDougall. She's an executive career coach and the CEO of Terry B. McDougall Coaching. She does, I'll just read it. She helps high-achieving professionals remove obstacles that keep them stuck so they can enjoy more success and satisfaction in their lives and careers. And we're here to talk to her about beer.
Yay!
So welcome. Let's get you in. So hello.
Hi there, Tony. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I was excited. So you had reached out. I do another podcast called Day Drinking on Delmarva, and we were going to have you on that, but it's not a show that really has a lot of guests yet. We play with the idea, but we never succeed unless, you know, we recently tried having a guest, and it was fine, and it was good, so we may do it more. But you mentioned that you had grown up in Milton, and so I thought that would be a good reason to have you on the beer podcast, because I'd like to talk about Pre-Dogfish Head Milton, and then, you know, about your travels and how you got out west, and then what it's like to have beer out there. So how did you end up in Milton, and what was Milton like before it was a Dogfish Head town?
Well, I moved to Milton with my parents in 1974. And, you know, it may be a little bit of a sad story. My dad had a job that we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And I think that my mom just really got tired of it. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were having some marital difficulties. And my mom was like, I don't want to move around anymore. So my dad got a job with Diamond State Telephone in Delaware. My cousins, my aunt and uncle and cousins lived in Ellendale, which is just down the road from Milton. Right. And so I guess they were just looking and they found a great old Victorian house in Milton. And I was telling you before we hit record that they bought it for $25,000 in 1974, which is unbelievable because it's a huge, gorgeous house. But so we moved there, and Milton was a very sleepy little town. And as I mentioned, it was a house where it was a town where you could get a big Victorian house for $25,000. Like, I don't really think anybody really wanted to move there then. There was like literally one stoplight in the town. And, you know, I was probably the new girl for like 5 years after we moved there, just because people didn't really move to Milton back then.
And it says a lot about how the area has changed, because obviously people started retiring there. People like your parents started retiring there, you know, especially in the 90s. It got really, really big. But you had actually worked at the cannery where they now make where they make most of the Dogfish beer and all of the Dogfish liquor. What was that? What was that called at the time, and what was that like?
It was called King Cole Cannery. And my stepdad had some connections there, and he got me a summer job there. I was actually a USDA pea inspector. So during pea season, when the big truckloads of peas would come in, they'd bring in a tote, which is basically like a big can full of peas from the back of the truck. And I would have to do these like tests on the peas so that I could grade them, you know, because certain customers only want grade A peas versus grade B, whatever. But I did that. And then during part of the summer, I was out on the cannery floor inspecting the labeling lines. So I'd have to make sure that the cans were getting the right labels on them. So it was a very exciting job. You know, it's like hot, and I had to wear a hard hat. And anyway,
did you literally separate each pea? That sounds horrifying. Is that?
Well, they trained me on what I had to do. I had to count out, I mean, there's like, I guess something that the USDA provides, and I had to pull out a certain number of peas, and I'd have to count how much debris was in, you know, like if I got like a quarter cup of peas,
right?
How many bugs were in there, how many sticks were in there, how much leaves, whatever. And then I'd have to take them and put it in a saline solution. And depending on like how many floated and how many sank, that there was like kind of a chart that I have to go by. And and figure out what grade it was.
That's fantastic. And you were a kid though. It wasn't.
I was like 19 years old. Yeah.
And how did you end up getting away from Delaware? What was your trip that brought you out west?
Well, I went to college at College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. So that
you are the second in 5 guests that has gone to William and Mary.
Is that right? Wow, yeah. How crazy!
12. I mean, it's a tiny school.
Yeah, it is. It's not a huge school.
Also, my favorite professor from college graduated from there. So anyway.
It's a great place. It was a really great place to go to college. My mom really liked Williamsburg, and she kind of, heavily suggested that I got in. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll go there. But I never really went back to Delaware for more than a visit after I got out of college. I mean, I went home for breaks and that kind of stuff, but there wasn't, I graduated from college in the 80s, and there really weren't a lot of, professional opportunities in Sussex County. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I ended up visiting my boyfriend in Boston. And while I was there, I was like, well, I guess I'll just look for a job. And so I got one. And so it wasn't like a big master plan, but that's kind of how I got out of Delaware.
And how did you find your way into the job coaching?
How did I? Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me that. Actually, I mean, I've had a long career already. I worked in marketing for 30 years, mostly at 2 large national banks. And in that time, I mean, I rose in my career, but there were a couple times that I was sort of at a crossroads, or I hit a wall where I was like, okay, I don't know what to do next, and I want to keep moving up. So a couple times I hired coaches to help me, so I understood what they did. And as I was in the last couple years of my last job at the last company, I wasn't really thrilled with where I was at that company. And I looked around and I didn't really see where there was a lot of opportunity to advance. And I started thinking about what do I like to do and what do I think I'm good at? And I had been I'd led teams of marketers, and I always spent a lot of time investing in the people that were on my team, because obviously if they do a good job, right, it's going to make me look good. It just was a win-win, for everybody. And I really enjoyed it. And so I decided to get a certification in coaching. And honestly, I didn't start off saying I'm going to start my own business. But I actually thought, I'll just get another job and I'll just kind of do this on the side. But as I was going through the coach training, a lot of the people in my class were starting businesses. And I guess it was just kind of contagious. And so I also thought okay, if it doesn't work out, I can always get a job. But it's 4 years later and I'm still doing it, and I really do love it.
And now are you hired by a company, or are you hired by individual managers, or?
Both. I mean, sometimes the company will do a contract where they want to provide coaching for a number of people in their organization. And so I'll work with them in that case. I've had individuals come to me and either they'll pay out of their pocket. I mean, often people will. But I've also had people where their company will reimburse them for working with me, just because they have training money in their budget. Right. And the company's kind of if you want to use it for coaching, that's fine. But
I've never been coached outside of whatever little league. So what is that like? What do you do?
Well, a lot of times the reason why people want coaching is because, I say I work with people that are successful but not satisfied. And what I mean by that is that if you looked at them on paper, you'd be like, okay, they work for a good company, they got a good title, they're making a good amount of money, but a lot of times they're feeling stressed. They're paying a high price for their success. And I just help them on 2 fronts. First of all, we get clear on what's your goal. And the goal could be that I don't want to work 70 hours a week.
Right.
Could be that, or it could be I want to get promoted to vice president. I mean, people have, or sometimes it's I want to get a different job. So I help them get clarity around what their goal is, and then we'll map out a plan to get there. But there's 2 things that I work with people on. First of all is getting solidly in that mindset that the thing that they want is possible. Because honestly, one of the biggest saboteurs of people's success is their own negative thinking. that they'll be like, well, I really want this, but here's all the reasons why I can't have it. And I'm like, no, let's not do that.
Right.
Let's get clear on what you want, and let's start believing that that's possible. And then the second thing is sometimes just helping them develop the skill sets that they need to be successful. For example, a lot of times people will get promoted and nobody has really taught them how to be a manager or a leader. So they're like trying to be a leader, but doing all the same things that they did when they were an individual contributor.
So you should be good at one thing and they just think they have to do that more.
Right. And that's not it. Like what got you here is not going to get you there. You got to figure it. And I like help people identify the leverage points. Like okay, now that you've been promoted, what are all the resources that are at your disposal? Let's get comfortable using them. Okay. And it could be delegating. It could be putting systems in place. I had somebody that, honestly was working like 70 hours a week and she was ready to ask for a demotion. And I was like, no, don't do that. Let's figure out a way that you can be successful. And part of like the first thing we did with her was I made her shut her door to her office 2 hours a day to do her own work because she had the door open and people were coming in all day long and she had to take her work home on the weekends. So
it's interesting. There are so many brewers that I've spoken to, and that was their solution. Their solution is if I'm going to have to do a 70-hour work week, I'm going to do it while I'm making beer. A lot of the people who transition from a more corporate world, like there are some people who are good at brewing, and then they're like, I don't know how to run a business. But there are some people who are like, yeah, no, I got the business part down. Just show me how to make the beer and I can.
Now I want to do something that I love. Yeah, absolutely. Something that's creative and fun. Yeah, for sure.
And how often do you think, not how often, I don't need a percentage, but do you ever say to somebody, you know what, I think you're right. You need to transition to a different job. You're the kind of unhappy you are now is the kind of unhappy you're going to stay if you stay here. Does that?
Yeah. I mean, I try to shine a light on what the situation is and let them determine it. But like, I'll say, well, what I'm hearing you say is that, no matter what you try, your boss is constantly critical, right? Like, I can help people show up differently. And a lot of times when they show up differently, they get different results. But there are honestly no-win situations. Like there are toxic places to work. There are terrible bosses out there. And, sometimes people will beat themselves up and blame themselves for the situation instead of stepping back and saying, no, this is a no-win situation. And my best option is to get the hell out. But I don't come in and tell them that. I'll just kind of like reflect it back to them so that they can make that decision. But if they decide to do that and I agree, I'll be like, I think that might be the best thing.
And how did you end up out west? Because you're in Illinois?
Yeah, I'm in Illinois. After I lived in Boston, I moved to DC and I was there for a while, met my husband, got my MBA at University of Maryland. And then I ended up shortly after I got out of at Maryland, my husband and I got married and we moved to North Carolina. I had a job with a bank down there and I was there for about 9 years. And actually this is, kind of ties back to the executive coaching. I threw my hat in the ring for a role at that bank. It ended up that I didn't get it, and I was really disappointed because I felt like I was really sort of the heir apparent, and it caused me to go out and hire a coach to improve my interviewing skills. And it's really funny about how when you prepare yourself, the opportunities come. Right. Because after I got done with coaching, I ended up getting a couple of great job opportunities, which resulted in offers. And one of them was for a bank out here in Chicago, which honestly, I'm an East Coast girl. I never really thought that I was going to be in the Midwest, but the opportunity was really a very attractive one. And so we moved here in 2005 and it's actually been the place that I've lived the longest in my life, which is weird.
And so you've been there as craft beer kind of hit. I mean, Chicago, land has always had a number of breweries, but are you that close to Chicago or are you farther out? Oh,
yeah. I mean, I worked in the city for 12 years. I'm like 2 blocks from one of the commuter rail lines and I would take it downtown every single day. And Yeah. I mean, it's 20, we're like about 20 miles to the Loop, which is, right in the middle of Chicago.
And so what was it like to see craft beer kind of start to happen?
Well, honestly, my husband has been like a major, lover of craft beer for years. I mean, we've been married for 25 years, and we were going to places and sampling craft beer before we were married. And a couple of the places I like thought about it. Like once when we were dating, we drove from the DC area over to Easton, and we went to a place called Wild Goose Brewing.
I wrote a book about that.
Yeah. And it was funny because we just, in preparation for this, I was like looking to say, like, where was that? Because honestly, I remember like we looked it up and we went there, and it was just like a little tasting room. It did not look like anything, right? But you could go in and they had a little tasting room in there. And then there was another place that, and again, this was like more than 25 years ago. We were on vacation in the Outer Banks, and we went to this place called the Weeping Radish.
Yes, I've also written about that. I've interviewed both of the people who started those breweries. That's I love Weeping Radish. I was actually there 2 years ago when we went down to the Outer Banks.
Yeah, I looked it up online. It looks way different than it was when we went there. It was just like a little house. I remember we sat outside and drank beer. I was just so entranced by the name, right? I just loved the name. It was so creative, really fun.
I'd like to tell you the story about that, only because I haven't told it on this show in a long time, and it's a great story. So it's a German immigrant who started it, and he just started brewing, and they're like, you can't have a brewery. He's like, no, it's a farmhouse brewery. It's not like a, and they're like, no, it's he's like, because it didn't even make sense to him that you couldn't just make beer on your
right, farm. Exactly. Coming from Germany, right? Because he's like, it's food. What are you talking about? Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so he started the craft beer law changes, much in the same way that Sam Calagione did it in Delaware. He was the one who started the craft beer legalization in North Carolina. So anyway, the two breweries that I loved, and they're storied breweries. Wild Goose is the guy who started Wild Goose was second in command to the guy who started the real ale revival in England. There's this man named Peter Austin, and people use brew systems made after him. And the guy his name escapes me now, Pugsley. Alan Pugsley was the head brewer at Goose.
Wild Goose. Yeah, Goose Island's here in Chicago.
Goose Island's by you, right?
Which honestly, I was thinking like, I know it's Goose. It was Goose something, but I was getting confused by Goose Island, and I was like, why not? I think it's Goose because it's Goose Island. But yeah, it was Wild Goose. But
I'm sorry, I derailed your story.
I don't even remember what my story was.
You were talking about the up and coming beer around you once you settled.
Yeah. So I live in Highland Park, Illinois, and I live in a neighborhood called Ravinia, and there are a lot of ravines around us. We're about a mile from Lake Michigan, and just there's like a big bluff like right along the lake, and then there's a lot of ravines. And that's why they call it Ravinia here. But there's also a music festival that's been here since 1904. And like the Chicago Symphony Orchestra plays here in the summer. This is kind of their summer home, their outdoor amphitheater and stuff. And some people actually, parents of one of my daughter's friends and some other people started this brewery here called Ravinia Brewing. And it's, one of the things I love about craft breweries is how creative they are. And they really take in a lot of the special things about the area that we live in and, use it in the names and flavors and all kinds of stuff, make it really local and personal. So, it's just fun. There's something that they've done for the past few years here in our neighborhood where they'll have food trucks come in from, like the whole summer into the fall. They'll have them come in on, I think it's like Thursday nights. And before Ravinia Brewing had an actual location, they were brewing. I think they brew down by Goose Island in Chicago. but their tavern is here right in our little town. I mean, it's literally like 2 blocks from where I live. And before they opened that, they would sell their beer at the food trucks. And so they have a Pilsner that's called the Food Truck Pilsner. And they've got Deep Ravine IPA. Like, they just use a lot of the like local landmarks and things that we know here in the names of their beers, and a lot of cool artwork and stuff. But the place where they ended up opening the tavern or pub was like the little teeny post office that we had in our neighborhood, which, you know, it was probably there for like 100 years or something.
Yeah.
And
I love that they reuse buildings. It's just so cool.
Yeah. Well, the thing that was cool about it is they closed, I'm thinking maybe like 10 years ago, they closed the post office. And the first new tenant that went in was actually Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh,
he opened up like a little tea like shop. Like, it had like different types of tea and smoothies and, like, you know, organic food and stuff like that. And he had that for a few years, and then he closed it. And then these guys opened the Ravinia Brewing in that location. So we've got like a little teeny downtown in my neighborhood that has a few restaurants and, you know, a couple bars and, you know, hairdressers and stuff like that. And I love where we live. It's, you know, a lot of my house was built in 1927. A lot of like older, you know, homes that were built in the, I guess, probably 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah. In the building boom that led up to the Great Depression, mine was too. 1927, they built my whole neighborhood, and then in 29 there was the
big crash. Yeah.
When you mentioned the music festival before, can you tell me when that is and what it's called?
Yeah, it's called Ravinia Festival, and you know, I would encourage anybody to look it up. I mean, it's legendary. They started it in 1904, and part of the reason why that was developed was because they were building these train lines, and they wanted people to leave the city to take the trains, and so they built it originally as an amusement park. You know, they had rides, and I guess they had music. They had a baseball field, and you know, it was just some place for people to get on the train and get out of the city whenever it was like hot in the summer. And I don't know when, but somewhere along the line, the symphony orchestra started playing there, and they have a mix of popular groups and the orchestra. Starting usually maybe like the first week in June and running through like the second week in September. And it's got an amphitheater. It's an open amphitheater with a roof, but it also has like a huge lawn. So people can either, you know, buy a more expensive ticket to be in the amphitheater, or just go and picnic and sit out on the lawn and listen to the music. And they have had, I mean, I can't even tell you, I've probably seen at least 100 groups since we moved here, but everything from Tony Bennett, James Taylor, Chicago, Carrie Underwood, Maroon 5, Elvis Costello. I mean, it's just been like, I actually kind of like say it's like the hit makers of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Right. Well, they do these tours, and those are, when I live near one in New Jersey. I don't live near one now, but it was always nice to say, well, for $10, yeah, I saw the Bee Gees once, because it's like, well, there's literally nothing else to do, and I'll go see the Bee Gees.
I can walk there from my house, and I knew when I first moved here that it was pretty special. One night when I was taking my trash out, and I was out on the back stoop, and I could hear Tony Bennett singing. I was like, okay, this is a special place.
That's absolutely fantastic. We're kind of running up against it a little bit, not too much, but I want to also talk about your book, which I forgot to mention. I have a book coming out myself. I'm very excited about it. My book is about conspiracy theory cults.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and
seems timely.
Yes. It's really funny because it's about people who believe in like the reptilian conspiracy.
Yeah.
And the bomber guy, the Nashville bomber, was apparently on that train.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it was unfortunate timing because my book's not out yet. So hopefully they'll bring him to trial when it comes out in March. But you wrote a management book.
Yeah, my book is called Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. And I started it basically as a blog. I didn't even think I was going to write a book, but I was just blogging when I left my job, just about kind of processing things, thinking back over lessons I learned. And, I'd always written a lot because I worked in marketing and it came pretty easily for me. And somewhere along the line, somebody said, well, how many words do you have? I was like blogging for a couple of years and I was like, I don't know. But I looked and I had like 25 or 30,000 words. And he was like, well, you got enough for a book. I did write a lot more after that. My book was like 75,000 words or something like that. But it was a good start. It was like the seeds. And It really is like the lessons that I learned in my career. It's a lot of lessons I was taught by good coaches and mentors I had on the way. And then I also interviewed a bunch of people about their careers, because I think a lot of times, especially when people are like earlier in their careers, or if they're at a place where they're sort of stuck, they just think like, maybe I'm not management material, or maybe this is as far as I'm going to go. And I have had the privilege of hearing many people's career stories, and, like people that have really impressive titles and so forth. And they're like, I got fired 3 times, or, I was sexually discriminated against, or whatever. They have stories.
Right.
So I wanted to tell some stories so people are like, oh, okay, I can keep going and maybe I'm going to get to where I want to go. I wanted to inspire people to, seek out that place where they're going to be happy and hopefully satisfied with where they are with work.
And is that, did you like kind of continue that? You have also a podcast, the Marketing Mambo podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the similar premise? I haven't had
I worked in marketing for my whole career, and I actually work with a lot of people who are in marketing and advertising. And I am a marketing nerd.
Uh-huh.
And I just love it. And obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, you can't get away from marketing. I was talking with one of my clients who's a marketing consultant a couple months ago, and we just got off on this really interesting conversation. And she said, this would make a really interesting podcast. And I was like, ding, ding. Okay, well, I'm going to start one. And so now I'm just talking to people that have interesting perspectives on marketing, whether they've got an interesting career or perspective, whatever. I'm just a marketing nerd. So I say I chat with people who are marketing movers and shakers from around the globe.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun.
I don't have. It's so funny only because as you know when you're getting ready, like I have a publisher, but that doesn't really mean anything. You still have to do like all the marketing yourself, and I'm like, I don't want to. I do want to do the book part, and then I don't want to do the rest of it. And it's not an option, but that's one of the things that can be kind of intimidating about it. So it's exciting. Like I think I'm excited for you to say, hey, I like to write the book, but I also like to do the marketing, and I like to promote myself. Like I'm not much of a self-promoter, and even now that it's down to like, well, you have to start self-promoting or get a job at Walmart. You are running out of options.
Yeah.
I have all this stuff that no one's buying because I'm not telling anyone that it's for sale.
Well, I at first was doing a lot of, there's something called Help a Reporter Out. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah.
And I was responding to a lot of those. Yeah, I was responding to a lot of those, and I got a lot of quotes, which definitely helped me with like credibility, but it takes a lot of time. I'm actually finding that being on podcasts is more fun, and I think for me it allows me to let people know who I am, right? It's a lot more than like just getting like maybe 1 or 2 lines in an article,
And that's one of the reasons it's been a pleasure to have you on. But one of the reasons I haven't made it exclusive to people who are in brewing is for that very reason, because everybody's got a couple of good beer stories to tell, and people like to connect. And there's only the same 150 beer writers you can talk to.
Yeah.
And then you're out and you have to start again.
Yeah. We didn't talk about this. Lagunitas has a big brewery here in Chicago, and their facility is incredible.
Yes.
We ended up, I don't know what it was. I think that we won something at it. Oh, my dog's whining. Go out there. We won like a special tour or something at Lagunitas, and that place is just incredible. It's Gabby, go out there. Go. Somebody will feed you. I'm the mom. I gotta feed her. But they have like a huge event space. They have like a tavern that's like up over the brewing vats and stuff. It's really, really cool. I mean, if anybody ever comes, I know it's not like a craft brewery, but it's a big one that's, I think, good.
All of the experiences are good to have. If you can have a beer experience, that's what it's like. And as a matter of fact, we're getting ready to close down the show. I'm sorry. There are two things I've got to tell you. One, I should have told you in the email, and I didn't. The last words in this show are "drink what you like and be happy." So if you could introduce yourself and say "drink what you like and be happy" at the end. But that's the reason we say that is because let's not fight over it. It's beer after all. But the other thing I wanted to do is invite you to promote anything, your social stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, my website is terrybmcdougall.com. If you're interested, if you're a marketing nerd and you're interested in Marketing Mambo, you can find that at marketingmambo.net. And my book is available. Again, that's Winning the Game of Work, and that's available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com.
Brilliant. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And remember, folks, until next time. I'm Terry McDougall.
I'm Terry McDougall, and drink what makes you happy.
Close enough. Have a great day.
Beer with Strangers was produced mostly by Dumb Luck. If you have a recipe, pairing, or brewery you think we should know about, reach out to us on stateofthebeer.com. If you like the show, please make sure you subscribe. And if you really like it, tell someone else who you think might like it as well. The State of the Beer is strong.